Hi and welcome to cgboomer.com. This is Hans Eriksson, and today is going to be the 8th day of my work in progress on my logo and web header, and part 4 of making the Blender record player. And today I'm going to be modeling the stylus base and arm for the record player before moving on to the faceplate, which will be on our next session. The stylus base and arm are two separate objects so that the stylus arm can be animated. Before moving into that, some of you might have seen that I made a test video of my transformation of my record player, so you can kind of see what I'm shooting for. As you can see, I'm beginning the morphing progress right now, and the record player should be morphing into a CD or into a laptop. The record turned into a CD and powered the laptop. I've got a lot of mistakes in the thing, but it's kind of a test to see what I have to do to improve and where I'm going. One of the mistakes, and I'm just going to pause it right here, you can see I needed to get rid of this little bracket here, and so I scaled it into the center, and when I did that, it just looks a little odd. I should have just dropped it straight down and hit it within the base. Also, just before it begins its transformation, these two objects right here, I'd feel a little better if they were just completely obliterated and taken out of view, so all you see is the wood plane prior to the transformation that I did with shape keys in turning this into a laptop. And the other morphing thing that I found that I didn't like is that it seems to be morphing along here and up here first, and then slowly morphing into the top over here and also the backside over here, and I'd like that to all be uniform, so I need to work on those shape keys a little bit more. The last problem that I saw was I got the size slightly wrong here, and it just instantly popped, and it should have done a transition. So those are a few things. And one more thing, for some reason I hit a mirror gloss on the touchpad and didn't mean to do that, so it's catching the reflection of the screen, and I need to uncheck one little box that I don't even know how it got checked. But all in all, it's kind of what I'm shooting for. And when I'm done, I think it'll look a lot better. So let's kind of progress. This is where we kind of left off. We had finished our base and got everything cut in. And the one thing about the base, and we'll just take a look. First of all, let's take the top, and we're just going to hide the top. We don't really need to be working with it. The base is done. There's really no more modeling to do on the base, so we can get rid of the mirror modifier. The only problem with the mirror modifier is if I try to apply the mirror right now, it's going to give an error because it needs to be at the top of the stack, and I can't move it up because this is in the way, and I don't want to apply the multi-resolution just yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cancel the multi-resolution, apply the mirror modifier, so now it's just one solid mesh. I really don't need this loop cut here anymore, so I can get rid of it. And then I can go back into and add the multi-resolution modifier again, and give it two subdivisions, and we're right back to where we started with. So we got a solid mesh, the mirror modifier is back on, and all is looking good. I realize at this point that we still just have one hinge sitting there, and we'll take care of that later when we get to animating our lid. But for right now, let's just go ahead and go into top view. We'll shift to edit. I'm going to grab one of these faces here. Doesn't really matter which one. and I'm going to set my cursor, going Shift S, and then cursor to selected, because I want that cursor to be sitting right on the top there. And then going back into top view, I'm then going to go back into object mode, and I'm going to add a plane. So it's Shift Add, or Shift A, plane, and I'm going to move it slightly over here. And it's always a good practice to be naming your stuff right away, and this is going to be the stylus base. So I'm going to go RC STYLUS base, and I'm going to constrain it S on the X, and kind of move it somewhat like that, and I'll probably just leave it that size for right now. And then I'm going to move it back to, actually I think I almost could make that just a little bigger. So let's go S sub Y and make it just a little bit bigger. G, and move it to right about here, looks good. And that should work. If I go into wireframe, I can see that my record just kind of covers that, which is about what I want. In fact, I could even go a little bit more into it right there, and that'll work. And going back into solid view, and going into vertex mode, I'm going to extrude that up by hitting E, and going up on the Z-axis just a bit, and let me move in there so I don't make things too big. G through Z, move it down just a little bit, then I'm going to extrude, move it up on the Z-axis again, and then going to top view, I'm going to scale on the X-axis and bring it in about like yay, and then scale on the Y-axis and bring it in kind of an equal distance. And that looks fairly good. So not really too worried on the size of everything right now, because all of that can be modified at a later time. If I go into solid view and hit shade smooth, you can kind of see what's happening there. Looks like I might have some normals out of whack, so let me go ahead and go back in here and hit A for everything and recalculate my normals, and that looks a little better. I'm going to go ahead and add a modifier, a multi-resolution, and I'm going to set it to 2, so everything smooths up, because eventually there's going to be a circle in here, and when there's a circle you need the at least 2 multi-resolutions to make it look right. Now in order to, let's also take this now and just take the whole thing, and G to grab, Z to constrain to the Z-axis, and just move it into the base just slightly. Okay, now let's go ahead and add some edge loops to control everything. So because if I go into solid mode, you can see how it deforms, and we need those edge loops to constrain everything. So let's go Control R, and I'm going to add 2 edge loops right here, and then Control R and add 2 edge loops right there, and then Control R, oops, Control R, and I'll pop in 2 edge loops there, and S scale on the X-axis and scale those out to right about there. and then do the same thing on this side here. Control R, pop in 2 edge loops with the scroll wheel, and then scale them on the y-axis and bring these out. And now if I go back into view, you see everything looks great. It's just about what I wanted. So the only other thing I have to do now is, let me pop back up into top view here. I think this whole thing could be just a little bit wider, so let me go back into view here. I'm going to go into wireframe so that when I box select, I'll get those vertices that are down below the top here. So now if I B to box and select all this side here, I can go G on the x-axis and just kind of move that over just a little bit like yay. And Alt Z will take me back into solid mode, and that just looks a lot better. So I'm going to grab this top face here, go Shift S, cursor to selected, so that I put my cursor right on top of that face there. And then I'm going to go Shift A, add a circle, give it 8 vertices. I'll change back into vertex mode here, and I'm going to scale it down to just about, let's say right about there. And then I'm going to go G sub Y to move it back on the y-axis, that way it stays perfectly centered. Then I'm going to extrude on the z-axis, move it up, and then I'm going to extrude, and then hitting Shift Z to keep it from going in the, hold it, now we go S, Shift Z, scale it so it stays on the X and Y axis. That looks pretty good. Then I'm going to extrude again, and Z to move it up on the Z axis, right about up to there, I think. Then I'm just going to scale that in by hitting Shift Z, just in just a little bit like that. Then I'm going to extrude, pop out of it, and I'm going to scale this by hitting S and then Shift Z again, and I'm going to take it into the center to right about there. Then I'm going to hit E to extrude again on the Z axis, pop that up, and now what I've got is I've got a base now to put my stylus on. So I'm now going to grab all of that by just hovering my mouse over and clicking L, and I'm going to go G and Z and kind of move it down inside here so that it doesn't, there's no chance of it showing. Now I need to control all of that. If I hit tab and go into solid view, I kind of got what I want. We can go ahead and shade that smooth, but I don't want it to look like a bell. So I'm going to go ahead and pop some loops in here. Control R, oops, Control R, and pop a loop right there. Control R, and take a loop up to here. Control R, and take a loop right out to here. Control R, and bring that loop to there. Control R, and drag that loop down. Control R, and drag this loop up to right about there. Control R, and bring this loop out. Control R, bring this loop in, so we got nice clean sharp edges, and then Control R, bring this loop down, and so it doesn't pinch at the top, we'll add one more loop. And now if we go into solid view, everything looks great. Now that little bell might be too high, but if it is, we can adjust that later. I just want to go ahead and continue on because we can make all the adjustments we need to at a later time. But for right now, this should be complete for the bottom of our base. So at this point, we want to add a new object for the stylus arm. And so I'm going to go back into view here, and I'm going to grab this top loop by hitting Alt and right click and Shift S, cursor to selected, so my cursor is right up at the top. And now I'm going to go back into solid view. If I add a plane right now, it's going to add it to this bottom. It's going to make it part of this bottom mesh, and I don't want it to do that. So as long as I'm in object view, it'll add a separate object. So let's go Shift A, add mesh, plane, and let's size that down. So we'll hit S and just size it right down to right about, let's say, there. And then S and Y to make it a little bigger this way, and that really doesn't look too bad. Now let's G and Z to move it into that little pivot there, so it looks as though it's pivoting right on that little stem, and about halfway down should be good. Okay, at this point I'm just going to kind of work on a basic shape here, and with old-time records, or record players, they tended to be a little boxy. The stylus arms did. So I'm just going to kind of make everything look a little boxy, and I'm going to go extrude on the Z-axis, and I'm just going to kind of take it up to, let's say, right about there. Then I'm going to grab these four vertices, and I'm going to extrude them out just a little bit, let's say right about to there. And then I'm going to scale them, and I'm going to exclude the Y-axis by going Shift Y, and just kind of scaling that in just a little bit like that. And that looks pretty much about what I wanted. Okay, now going in top view, I'm going to hit E again, extrude, and I'm just going to bring it right out to, let's say, about there. I can adjust these shapes and sizes at any time that I want. I'm going to scale that all in by hitting S and again excluding the Y-axis, because I only want it to go up and down and right to left, and I'm just going to kind of pinch that in a little bit. Alright, that looks pretty close to what I want. I'm going to extrude and bring it out just a little bit, and then I'm going to scale that up again on the, but I'm going to exclude the Y-axis, so Shift Y, and just kind of bring it up a little bit like yay. Yep. Alright, now I want this top portion to be a little more even with the top. I want it to kind of angle up a little bit, but I want this to be a lot deeper. In other words, I kind of want it a little off center. So I'm going to go G sub Z and just kind of move it down a little bit like that. So it's a little bit deeper at the bottom than at the top. And then I'm going to extrude out to right about there. I'm going to then scale it, Shift Y in just a little bit like that, and that looks pretty good. That looks about what I want there. Now, the one thing that I do know is I'm going to have to make sure that as this stylus plays, it hits the record, and then when it rotates in, it's going to end up at the center right about here. So by going to top view, and because my pivot is right there, I can just rotate this like yay, and lo and behold, I kind of hit exactly what I wanted, which is kind of amazing. If I didn't, all I would have had to have done is by going back into edit mode, grabbing all of these vertexes, top and bottom, and just scaling them, or just grabbing them and moving them back and forth on the y-axis until I got that right. So it's a little bit trial by error, but I think you get the gist of what it is that I wanted to do. So that actually worked out pretty good. So I need to go in here, and I'm going to add a multi-resolution modifier. I'm going to subdivide it one time, and then I'm going to shade it smooth, go back in, and then you got it. I'm going to start adding my edge loops to control my edge flows here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just come right over to here, and I'm going to Control R, and I'll add a couple right there, and then scale them on the y-axis to kind of get them out to the edge there. I'm going to put a couple right in here, Control R. I can barely see, so let me get in a little closer here. Alright, Control R. I'm just going to add a couple in there and just take the default. I'm going to Control R again and grab that one and move it to about here. Control R, grab it and move it into about there. And I'm going to check this other end over here, because sometimes you get a chance to kind of cross over when you see how it's really narrow here and a lot wider here, and that's because of the way that I modeled this. So you have to be a little careful not to get things too close when you're adding your loops, because you can get these vertices to cross over and create some nasty artifact. You can already see that that's improving quite a bit, but we do need some more edge loops, so we'll go ahead and add those in. Going to the side here, we'll add a couple here, Control R, add 2, and then S on the Z axis, and scale those out to right about there. Again, looking at this end here to make sure that I didn't cross over anywhere, and that looks good. Alright, put in a couple edge loops here, Control R, and then scale them on the y-axis and kind of scale those in like that. Should be close enough. Notice how I got this pinching down here, and that's because when I scaled it, I actually took the size that it was here and moved it in, and that is not what I wanted to do. So let's Control Z, Control Z. Actually, I just want to add one loop cut and just drag it, and that way it follows that contour and doesn't do that pinching. And if you go down here and look, you can see that it did it quite nicely. So we'll go G sub Y and just kind of bring that down to there. And we'll add another loop cut now. Control R and drag that right over to there. Looks good. And that should control that edge flow quite nicely. We'll add a couple of edge loops right in here. Control R. And again, we're just going to drag it, one edge loop, and then Control R, and add another edge loop, and kind of drag it back to right about there. Control R, take that edge loop and drag that over to here. and then Control R. We can do the same thing right there. And looking around, let's go ahead. Wow, see how I almost got into some crossing over there. That would have been very, very ugly. Let's go ahead and go into solid view, see how that looks, and that really doesn't look too terribly bad. That's very, very close to what I wanted. Now, if we want to, we can go ahead and add a pin coming down, a needle. If we get rid of the base real quick, get over here and find, there we go. If we just hide the base, we can get down here, and if we grab this face, we can add a circle right there and extrude it out and make a stylus pin. And if you wish to do that, you feel more than free to do that, but I would say that this is pretty well done as it sits right now. For our purposes, nobody is going to be getting that close to look and see if you've got a stylus needle in there or not. The main things that you should be watching for is that when this swings in, that it'll hit right to that center point there, right about where the needle would be. The other thing is, if you go into side view here, that you have plenty of clearance for your record, so that this can pop up over and then slide over and drop down on the record, so everything looks just about right. So the only thing we have to do is now we have to add kind of like a little rest right here, a little clip or something for the stylus arm to sit on when it's at rest. And we probably should put some control knobs in here, which we really don't have room for right now. So let's go back into top view. I'm going to go ahead and add the base again real quick, just for a second, and then we're going to grab this. And the one thing we didn't do here is we didn't rename this, and it's a good thing not to forget those things. So I'm going to go RC STYLUS ARM. Keep naming your things, otherwise you're going to get lost, and you're just going to have things in here that says planes and circles, and you're going to be guessing as to what everything is. So let's go into view here, make sure everything is deselected, and if we want to grab all these vertices and just kind of move them this way a little bit. So if we go box select and select these vertices, but now remember, a couple of these vertices were hidden underneath this and also to the side that you couldn't reach because we have our occlusion on. And I like to leave that occlusion on, so the one thing that we need to do is we need to always remember when we're doing a box select and we want to select everything on one side here, to always go into wireframe, and that way you'll catch everything. So let's redo that. We'll hit B to box. We'll grab these right here, and then we're going to go G and X to move these over, and just indiscriminately move it to right about there. And then going back into solid mode, that doesn't really look too bad. So going back into mode here, I'm going to grab that face, go Shift S, cursor to selected so that my cursor is right there, and then I want to stay in edit mode this time because I want what I'm going to do to be part of this mesh. So Shift A to add a plane, and I'm going to scale it, and I'm going to just kind of move it somewhere right about there, I think. And I'm going to scale it on the y-axis, make it narrow, G to kind of move it over just a little bit so it looks kind of halfway even on both sides, and maybe scale it on the x-axis just a little bit. and that should work. Now I am going to hide the base so that the base isn't in my way. So I'm just going to hit the little eye there and kind of get rid of it. And I'm going to add two edge loops here. Well, no, I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to go into side view. And I am going to go into vertice mode, and I'm going to hit extrude, and I'm going to extrude that up a little well, yeah, just a little beyond like that, and then hover over my mouse over one of these vertices, hit L so I catch everything, and then I'm going to hit G and Z, and I'm going to kind of move that down. And the reason I'm doing that is I don't want to end up with openings at the bottom there. I want it to all look solid even though it's not, and I want to be just below that arm. So G and Z, and right about like that. Okay, now I'm going to add a loop. I'm going to go back into top view, Control R, and I'm going to move that loop to just that side of the arm, and then Control R, and move that loop to this side of the arm. I'm not going to be real fancy with this little resting piece here. I'm going to grab these four vertices here, go into front view, extrude, and move that up just a little past the arm. I'm going to come to this side, grab these four vertices here. Oops, ended up grabbing one in the back there. And back in front view, and G and, whoops, not G, I'm going to hit extrude and just kind of move that up probably about that far, about halfway. And that should make a resting thing for my stylus. So when it's at rest, if I were to go into solid mode, you kind of see what I'm shooting for. That looks like caca right now, but we're going to go ahead and smooth it. And that's because of the modifier that's been applied. So now we're going to control it with our edge loops, and go Control R, and move that one over, Control R, and move that one over, go into the top here and Control R, and I'm just going to add a couple in there and leave it at its default. Control R, and move that one down to right about there. Control R. We'll pop a couple in there, and then S and Z, and oops, kind of move that right about there. Control R, pop a couple in there, S and Z to scale these on the Z axis. And I don't think I really forgot any. Let's take a look. No, that actually doesn't look too bad. This isn't like a real high tension point where people are going to be looking at this extremely hard, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. It's going to be one of the least visible things in the mesh, so like I say, I'm not going to worry about it too much. The only thing left here now is I need to make some control knobs so that I see that my cursor is still selected there. So let me go back into edit mode, because I want to add this to my mesh, and I'm going to hit Shift A, add a circle, change it to 8 vertices. I'm going to scale it down to about like, that looks about control knob size, and then G to grab and just move it. As long as I'm in perfect orthographic top view, it'll stay right on that plane, so I don't have to constrain it to anything. And I'll move it, let's say, right about there. and that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to extrude Z for the Z-axis and bring that up to, let's say, right about there. I'm going to extrude again and on the Z-axis and move that up just a little bit, and then S to scale that. Exclude the Z-axis by hitting Shift Z and move that in right about there. And then I'm going to extrude again on the hit Z for the Z-axis, move that up just ever so slightly, and then scale that in, Shift Z to right about like yay. That looks, well, actually I could scale that just a little bit more. S, about like yay. And then I'm going to extrude one more time and click right out of it. I'm going to go over to the side panel here and hit merge at center. And that should make my, that should pretty well make what I want here. Let's take a look. Not too bad. I'll go ahead and shade it smooth. I want it to be a little more, not quite so button shaped, because they didn't make things rounded like then. But the one thing we need to do is we need to get rid of those nasty triangles. So we're going to zoom right in here and grab two of these triangles and hit F to make a quad face. Do the same thing here, merge all these together to make quads, because you know I'm death on triangles. And that looks pretty good. So now let's get Control R and just scale that right down to there. Control R and add a couple loops there, and S and Z, and move that up, and I think that's about all we're going to need. I kind of like that. So let's go ahead and hover our mouse over the top there, hit L so it selects everything, and then we're going to go G and Z and just kind of move that down into the mesh a little bit and go into top view, and I'm going to go Shift D to duplicate it, and then Y to constrain it to the Y-axis, and I'm going to move it down, and I'm going to be looking here at the one at the side right over here. So I'm going to go G and Y, and I'm going to move it to right about, let's say there, and you can see that it's about 0.6. So if I just hit 0.6 on my noon pad and then a minus sign, that's going to move it right there. And the reason I did that is I want to duplicate this again and move it exactly the same distance. So I'm going to hit Shift D, click out of it, G, Y minus 0.6, and I've got 3 control knobs. I figure one for off and on, one for volume, and the other one for the RPM speed, as to whether or not you're playing a 45 or a different records had different RPM speeds, so that is just about what I want there. And so now that is our stylus base. We'll be animating it later when we animate our lid. So right now I think we're actually sitting pretty good. That looks just exactly what I want. It looks as though this record might be interfering a little bit with the bass. Might be, when the record's there, it might be hitting that. So I'm going to grab these two objects here, both objects, and I'm going to go G and Y, and or G and X, and Shift, and just kind of move that over just a little bit, so that I know that I'm not going to be, when the record's sitting there, it's not going to be hitting this. And now I'm just going to grab my stylus arm, I'm going to rotate it to make sure that I'm still hitting that center. I'm a little off now, so by going to tab and then into wireframe, making sure everything is deselected. I'm going to V to box select, grab that in there, and then G and Y, and just move it maybe about that far. Go back into solid view and then rotate, and bingo, I'm right exactly where I want it to be. Everything's looking good, so I'm happy with what I got. So that's going to end this tutorial or work in progress if you're just following and not really doing anything. As always, on my website at cgboomer.com, you can find this model along with a PDF version of what it is that I'm doing here, a written version as well as this video tutorial. So feel free to go over there and grab it and download it. I apologize for the long lapse in my little works in progress, but I felt like I needed to kind of get ahead and do some tests and stuff to make sure I wasn't leading everybody in the wrong direction. So this is where I'm going to leave the tutorial for today. And so this is Hans with cgboomer.com, and happy blending.